And we're live. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Cowboys Roundup for January 20th, 2025. On today's episode, we're going to be going over some of the Cowboys head coaching candidates. I was about to say free agent targets, but then I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be going over some of the head coaching candidates. We're going to talk about, some of the things from wildcard weekend here. And, look, this is a therapy session today. I know it was a rough weekend for Cowboys fans. Obviously the Commanders won, the Eagles won. We have an NFC East NFC Championship game, and I think we are all going to be watching that in pure and utter misery. Before we get into the episode, please make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to both Space Cowboy Media and myself. We would greatly appreciate that. And let's get into the episode. How are you doing today, Ricardo?
I'm doing pretty well, my man. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. We know that this is the worst. I mean, you have the Commanders now leaping you. Now you have the longest drought in the NFC for a appearance in the title game. You got the Eagles there, but we'll see how they do there. But yeah, man, but the coaching search continues, man. They're not rushing into this. We're hearing a lot of word about what they're going to do, and we'll get into that into today's episode. But I know we're going to talk about a couple things that happened during divisional round weekend, as now the NFC and AFC championship games are set between the Chiefs and Bills and the Eagles and the Commanders.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to get into the playoff games, or do you want to start with the head coaching candidates?
Let's go ahead and start off talking about divisional round, because it's going to set the tone for like what we're wanting to see from the Cowboys moving forward, right? Especially from what we're seeing, how these coaches are maneuvering and how they're operating these games. Like looking at the scores here, right? When we talk about what happened, I believe we had it was the Texans and Chiefs, and then the Commanders and Lions that played on Saturday. We saw that a lot of what got these teams to where they're at isn't because of high-powered offenses. It's because of the fact that their defenses were able to limit the big play abilities from these teams as best they could. For those that won, by the way, of course. But they took advantage of matchups and why coaching matters. We saw George Karlaftis get 3 sacks off of Dalton Schultz, and they didn't change up what they were doing or anything like that, right? And I think the other thing too is you look at the Commanders versus the Lions. The Commanders had an up-tempo offense that the Lions couldn't keep up with. They understood that and they ran with that, right? And again, very well coached and disciplined. Then you go to the other 2 games, which was, I believe it was the Eagles and the Rams game was the first one. And then the second one was the Bills versus Ravens. Which, by the way, we had a much better product on the field this go around than last round, right? But what's crazy is all of the home teams have won, with the exception of the teams that the Commanders beat. So again, they're able to control the time of possession, limit turnovers, but I don't want to take it up too much because there was a couple things that happened, especially in that Ravens and Bills game, when it comes to certain narratives that irk the hell out of me. And you probably know what I'm talking about, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on what you saw from divisional round weekend.
Well, my biggest takeaway from divisional round weekend is just how impressive Washington looks. I mean, offensively, when you talk about both the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and the play caller, Kliff Kingsbury, I mean, these guys are in lockstep right now. I think that Jaden Daniels does a very good job of being efficient. He's not like Lamar Jackson type of special, but he's the type of guy that can, play within the structure of the offense. And then when asked to make special plays, the guy can make special plays. And I'm just very impressed with the balance that we're seeing with this Washington offense. When you talk about, the running backs that they have with Robinson and Austin Eckler, that is a true running back by committee over there. They just complement each other so well. And this team is just playing at a very high level right now. They have some really nice receivers with McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, and Olamide Zaccheaus, along with Zach Ertz and Bates. This is an offense that, they have some legitimate talent on it. And I give them a really good chance in this game on Sunday. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Kliff Kingsbury is calling offense at a very high level right now. He's not putting his quarterback in bad positions. And, just everything that the Lions tried to dial up on Saturday, it seemed like Kliff Kingsbury had a counter for it. And he really didn't allow Detroit to catch on to any tendencies that he was having. So just a masterful performance there when it comes to the play calling from Kliff Kingsbury and the quarterback play from Jaden Daniels. That's the one takeaway I take from this. And another takeaway I take from this is, look, you can have a quarterback making over $50 million being an utter game manager, throwing for 120, 130 yards a game, and win playoff games if your football team's good enough. If the team around the quarterback is good enough, you can win games. And that's what we saw here with the Eagles, because, they have a special running back there with Saquon Barkley. Their defense is playing at a very high level. But just the quarterback play is just so unimpressive that it makes you say, like, hey, look, I get it. Jalen Hurts is winning games. 1, wins aren't a quarterback stat. Don't care what anybody says. And 2, you have to ask yourself this question, like, are we sure Jalen Hurts is better than, like, Will Levis? Because I don't know, Will Levis struggled this year in Tennessee, but I would also counter that by saying, hey, if you gave Will Levis 12 seconds to throw the football and he's throwing the ball to AJ and Devontae and Dallas Goedert, and he can hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley, are we sure that this team isn't 14-3 as well? So that's one of the key takeaways that I take from this as well, is that, you can have a well below average quarterback and win big playoff games if your team is built properly, and Philadelphia has the ingredients, and, credit to them, no doubt about it.
And the thing is like, when you look at how this weekend went, all of the teams that had the most yardage and were able to move up and down the field lost. And a lot of that comes down to the turnover battle. This is where I get really annoyed with the dialogue, is that there are excuses for Lamar Jackson having the turnovers that he had. There are excuses for the turnovers that Jalen Hurts had, or even the safety he had. But when Dak Prescott does a similar thing, or he doesn't do anything similar to that, I should say, he gets scrutinized to kingdom come. And I'm not saying he's void of criticism. I want people to be very clear when I say what I'm saying here. It's because I want there to be a standard. Like when Justin Herbert threw as many interceptions as he did in that game, and when Jordan Love threw as many interceptions, I never saw not as much criticism when it came to with Dak. And again, I just want there to be a balance there. If Dak Prescott has a bad game, you got to call it out for sure. But at the same time, we can't be coming up with excuses. Like Lamar Jackson had 2 turnovers, which led to points, if I recall. And no one is, it's Mark Andrews' fault. He did the thing at the dude. I think the Ravens win that game if Lamar Jackson doesn't turn the ball over and if all those things don't compile. But again, to your point, I completely agree. If you have a situation where you're winning a football game and your quarterback's only asked to throw the ball, let's just say 20 times, and he has 150 yards and he rushes for a touchdown, isn't that the goal? And we'll see how he does, because I know he's hurt, and we'll see if he plays on Sunday, giving the Commanders a possibility to go to the Super Bowl this upcoming week. But no, man, I think my final takeaway from Divisional Round Weekend is that you don't need your quarterback to be a superhero to win football games. We clearly saw that. Sure, Josh Allen was doing his thing, but they were able to run the ball with James Cook and all that other stuff. And then you talk about what the Commanders did. I think Jaden Daniels had the best quarterback performance this weekend. And again, it wasn't like he was being asked to make superhuman throws. He was able to be in a scheme that allowed him to do those things. And again, when we say that, that's not an excuse for your quarterback that you have now. They can't do this, that, or a third. It's just we're reacting to what we see. And the Cowboys have not done any of that in the not even just with Dak, but with Romo or any of them. So I don't mean to go on forever on that, but was there any final thoughts you had for Divisional Round Weekend before we get into the coaching search?
Well, to piggyback off what you're saying about Lamar Jackson, the standard is completely different from Lamar Jackson than it is for Dak Prescott. And it absolutely shouldn't be, because Lamar Jackson is about to win his third MVP. I would say this probably should only be a 2-time MVP because Dak deserved that award last year. That's besides the point. The standard's higher for Lamar Jackson because people look at him as a all-time great quarterback. And when this guy has been in the playoffs, like, I'm sorry, he had 2 turnovers yesterday. We can't sit here and say that Lamar Jackson did everything he could to win that football game when he just flat out didn't. That is a bold-faced lie. And the only reason why people are saying that is because they're fans of Lamar Jackson. They like him. That's why they're saying that. I think that he's one of the most protected quarterbacks in the entire NFL from a lot of the media. You know, some of the fans might hate on him, and I get that. I understand that. But, man, talk about you're seeing Ryan Clark and guys like that say, like, oh, Lamar did everything he could, when that's just not the case. It's a flat-out lie. Lamar Jackson was a reason why that team lost the game. And even on that throw to Mark Andrews, that wasn't some great throw for the 2-point conversion. That wasn't a great throw. It didn't fall right into Mark Andrews' hands. So I think he's taking a little bit too much blame. But, you know, I will say I definitely gained a ton of respect for Lamar Jackson this season. But come playoff time, let's keep it real. He hasn't been good enough. And that's just what it is. And, you know, granted, we're talking about it with the teams. You don't need to be good enough, quote unquote. You just need to have a really good football team around you. And that's the way I look at that. And then last thing I'll say is, actually, you want to know why I don't really have anything about the Chiefs game because, I mean, it's just a Chiefs.
Dude, they're inevitable. They're like Thanos. They're inevitable. They're probably going to beat I hope not, but it would be funny if it's the Bills in the Super Bowl versus another NFC East team and they lose to another NFC East team. That would be something. But we want to spend most of our time, as we know, guys, Cowboys coaching search continues. We now know that they have interviewed Kellen Moore virtually per the regulations with him being on a team that's still in the playoffs. They have interviewed Robert Saleh in person, and they're set to interview Leslie Frazier in person today. Now, we have not heard any other names in terms of like lined up interviews, but we will see what happens after this Leslie Frazier interview. So what I wanted to do is kind of go in order of who they've so far interviewed, talk about, okay, are they qualified? Are they not? How do we feel about it? What would it feel for the team? So with that, we're going to start with Kellen Moore. Okay. Now, for those that don't know or don't remember, Kellen Moore has been a homegrown coaching talent for the Cowboys since 2019 or 2018. This is what's crazy. In 2018, he became the quarterback's coach after he retired. Then the year after that, he became the offensive coordinator for several seasons. He then leaves, goes to LA, still an OC, but still gets a ton of interviews, but no one takes him to be their head coach. And then he goes to Philadelphia.
As a matter of fact, I want to add something to that. They fired their coach midway through the season.
And they did not make him the interim head coach.
They didn't make him the interim head coach. So, yeah, a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, and that's a key thing because usually if you are a guy that has a young coach on your roster or on your coaching staff, you want to see what he can do as like a pseudo interview. But now there has been rumors that he has been the odds-on favorite to become the next head coach of the Cowboys. But like that has been an ongoing thing even before he left here, that he was set to be the next head coach, very similar to how Jason Garrett became the head coach. So I wanted to start off with you. What do you feel about his qualifications as a head coach? Do you think he's qualified? Like, just what are your overall thoughts on Kellen Moore, the head coach candidate?
Not impressed, to be honest with you. He's on his third job in the last 3 years. If you are a young hotshot offensive coordinator, very much the likes of, Ben Johnson, one of those guys, you don't go from job to job to job. High profile jobs too, Cowboys, offensive coordinator for one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert. And, he was in Philly. That's a big market. These are high profile jobs that he's bouncing from place to place to place. And I would just say like, hey, yeah, they're winning in Philly. But again, a lot of that has to do with the talent kind of bailing him out. I mean, he almost lost that game yesterday for them. I mean, he really did. But that horrible play call there at the end where they decided to run play action and Jalen Hurts got sacked for like 8 yards and put him in a really bad position. I worry about his leadership, tangibles. That's something that I worry about. I get it. Not everybody has to be a rah-rah guy, but at the same time, there's nothing convincing about the guy. Do you think Kellen Moore's the type of guy that's going to get in somebody's face and say, hey, you have to be better? No, I don't think that at all. I mean, you actually see some things with this Philadelphia offense, like A.J. Brown sitting on the bench reading a book. I mean, part of that I think does have to do with the offensive coordinator not getting these guys where they need to be from, in a certain headspace. And we saw things on the sidelines with, Jason Witten going after Kellen Moore. And not only that, you hear the Buccaneers players saying like, hey, that offense was predictable and things like this. I mean, no. Everybody in the comment section, by the way, everybody in the chat say hashtag no Kellen Moore, because guess what? If we get that message out loud enough, they might listen. Might, but don't count on it.
Right. And I wanted to also point to the fact that with a guy like Kellen, I know that he's not dumb. I know that he's a very smart guy, but being a smart guy is one thing, but being like a CEO or a leader is a whole nother thing. And to me, and this is the biggest red flag of them all, if the Cowboys do hire Kellen Moore to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, I want you to think about this. The Dallas Cowboys have never had like a brand new, like not from the organization head coach, a brand new OC, or a new DC since Jimmy Johnson was here. Now, for those that are going to be like, but Space, back in 2007, they hired Wade Phillips, Garrett, and Brian Stewart, I believe. And those were all new. Here's the thing. Jason Garrett was hired before Wade Phillips got the job. So I don't count that, man, because they already hired him before they even got a new head coach. So to go 30 plus years without just having a clear vision with the head coach deciding who he wants is terrible. And if you hire Kellen Moore, that's going to continue. And for me, if Kellen gets the job, congrats to him. He's a regular dude like you and me. He's trying to find a job, or a promotion. I completely understand that. But to me, Kellen Moore, there's a reason Kellen isn't here anymore, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
I want you to think about this. If you were to look at, hey, you know what? Kellen Moore has had some top offenses here with the Cowboys, but what did he do with these other teams, right? In LA, his passing concepts and his play calling was not good. Statistically speaking, they were middle of the pack when it came to the passing offense. And also a lot of Chargers fans complained about his situational awareness when it came to calling plays. Just this year, Eagles fans were complaining about the exact same things. And also, the passing offense was worse. Now, a lot of people will point to, but Space, he has Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. Oh, Space, he had Justin Herbert as his quarterback. But that's not a good thing. Usually, if you are someone that is a good coach, you understand who you have, and you make it work with that. But they have Saquon Barkley taking most of the load off of Jalen Hurts, so they don't have to worry about having to see him on the forefront of passing. And we have seen, look at the route concepts. They aren't good. And what's crazy is people forget that Dak Prescott threw the most interceptions in his career under Kellen Moore and his offense. But people will be like, but Space, he had a great year under Kellen Moore back in 2021. Well, if we want to go further than that, let's think about this. Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer had Dak Prescott play the best quarterback season of his career back in 2023 when he was an MVP candidate. And so for me, if you bring back Kellen Moore, that tells me a couple things. One, you're scared to go outside your comfort zone. Number two, you feel that you're doing this because Dak Prescott's the quarterback and you're trying to make him happy rather than get him someone that's going to coach him. And then finally, it shows me you don't care. And you might be saying, but Space, that's not fair to Kellen. Okay, Kellen Moore has been in the league as a coach since 2018, and he has still not grown. And people want to talk about how we don't want to coach with training wheels, considering we're trying to win a championship. But you're going to do that anyway? Like, it's the Jason Garrett hire. And I apologize to go on and on. But that's why I don't want Kellen Moore here. It would be signaling that you guys are not serious.
Yeah.
So.
No. And then that's the thing, right? People could talk about Dak all he wants, but let's be honest. This isn't a serious football team. And everybody knows it's not a serious football team. And yet still people are like, oh, it's Dak's fault. I don't understand that. Guys, I want people to understand this. Wins are not a quarterback stat. I'm sorry to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'm seeing in one of the chats. Wins are not a quarterback stat. People need to stop with that nonsense because, Mike Tirico put it perfectly yesterday on the broadcast. I don't know if you caught when he said this. He said, all 10 guys can execute the play perfectly. If the 11th doesn't, the play falls apart. It's so damn true. This is a team sport. It's the ultimate team sport. And I don't understand how we can look at a college national championship game tonight with Will Howard and Riley Leonard, two guys that are not the best quarterbacks in the country, and yet we can attach that and say, hey, they're just quarterbacks on really good teams, but we're incapable of doing that in the NFL. It's like, that's like foreign to people. It's crazy to me. And to go back to your Kellen Moore point, if they hire Kellen Moore, there is just no way that they can seriously tell us that they're serious about winning football games. They're very serious about being comfortable where they are. But in terms of trying to get to that next level and win a Super Bowl, there's no way you're telling me that you are serious about that. If you hire Kellen Moore, a guy he's not ready to be a head coach, and that's just what it is. And a lot of people, even in the Philadelphia area, that are diehard Eagles fans, are saying, "Hey, Kellen Moore's not it. We don't like Kellen Moore. Take Kellen Moore back." That says something to me. So that's a little rant that I wanted to go on about Kellen Moore.
And that's A-okay, because at the end of the day, we're going to figure out what happens after the Leslie Frazier interview today to see if they go after any other candidates or interview anybody else. But moving along, I want to talk about the two other guys that they did interview. Now, of course, I did mention Leslie Frazier, which I'll go ahead and start with him because he's getting the interview today. Now, Leslie Frazier's been in the league for quite some time. 65-year-old guy. He played in the NFL back in the 80s. He was with the Bears. He actually won the championship with them over there. He's been in coaching since the 80s. And I think one of the big things is, for those that don't remember or maybe do, he was the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings before. He has bounced around as a defensive coordinator. Right now, he's an assistant head coach with the Seattle Seahawks. Most recently, if we're talking about being a coordinator of any kind, it was with the Bills between 2020 and 2022. And to be honest with you, I don't think that he is a serious candidate for the job. As you know, that per the regulations of the National Football League, you need to have 2 minority interviews in order to satisfy that rule. Also, Robert Saleh was on the list. But for Leslie Frazier, I never really thought of him as a good head coach. I think that he's a solid coordinator, nothing else. Again, just kind of looking at his history and what he's done, I'm, again, not been a super fan of him. Not that I've been super in depth watching him, but just watching at what he's done throughout the National Football League, he's just kind of meh. And so I think it's just we're checking the box off type of situation, like what they did with Marvin Lewis back in 2020.
100%. That's what this is. They're bringing him in to satisfy Rooney Rule. Maybe that they put something out there saying, hey, if you're not our head coach, are you interested in this specific position on our coaching staff? We'll keep you in mind and stuff like that. I'm not going to spend too much time here on Leslie Frazier just because it's not a serious interview.
Right. Exactly. That's why
I will say, though, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do want to get this off my chest about the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule is useless. I mean, let's just be honest here. The only thing that the Rooney Rule does is waste minority head coaches' time, unless it's a serious candidate, and it wastes the team's time. People are wasting time to satisfy a rule that shouldn't be in place. Like, that's what really kills me here, because you see what the Patriots did interviewing Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton. Seriously? These are not serious coaching interviews. Hell, as a matter of fact, most of these guys don't even end up on staffs after this when it comes to that. Like, yeah, sure, it gets their names out there, but okay. And doesn't mean that they're going to be in any serious consideration for a coaching position. And it's quite frankly, it's insulting to the fans out there when they see Leslie Frazier. There's no chance he's getting a job. It's the same thing with Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton over there in New England. They're not getting jobs. No, a guy like Brian Flores, a guy like, Aaron Glenn, those guys, I think that there's a very real possibility that they get jobs. And, there's that, but just the Rooney Rule, it's just so damn, it's so damn pathetic to me, because teams don't actually use the rule for what it's supposed to be used for. And that's something that really, really gets under my skin there.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that bugs me about the rule is that, like, I think it's just crazy to me that, again, it's not that you're actually considering these people. You're just doing it. Just do a check mark, which is just insulting. Like, that would be like if you're at work and they just interview you for a position that you probably want, and they're saying, oh, they're not going to say it to you, but they're just doing it just to be like, oh, we interviewed X amount of people so that we can satisfy that we made the quota, which is bullshit, just to be honest with you. So I do agree with you. I think there needs to be revisions or just the elimination of the rule in general, just because it's bullshit. But I understand why it's there, and I think that that's important. But I did want to also talk about the other dude that was brought in, and that's Robert Saleh, who I think is a more than qualified candidate for the job, given with what he's gone through, and I'll outline it. So for those that don't know, Robert Saleh, he's a 45-year-old dude. He's been in coaching since 2002. He has been in the league as a coach for the past 20 years, starting out with the Texans, then moving over to Seattle, bouncing around, and then eventually he lands this gig with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. And he ends up doing so well, he gets a coaching job with the Jets. And I want to be very clear. I think he was given a BS situation over with the Jets, which are one of the most dysfunctional. Yes, he was one of the most dysfunctional organizations in all of football. And I say that knowing, being a Cowboys fan, that we are also a dysfunctional organization. But think about it, man. He had no freaking quarterback. Like, there were moments where I want to say it was 2022, one of those years, and people in the comments can correct me. The Jets had so many one-possession games go the opposite way that they had a chance of making the playoffs if their offense wasn't so putrid. And you might say, well, isn't that his fault? But when you really think about it, I really look at a situation where he had no quarterback. They made no incentive to change the quarterback until they got Aaron Rodgers, and he blew out his freaking Achilles in the first couple plays. But even when he was there, Aaron Rodgers didn't play well. I don't think that that's Saleh's fault that his quarterback's playing terrible. And I think, and I don't want to be very clear, like, when I say terrible, I'm not saying like, okay, he was playing pedestrian and that's not good enough. Like, no, Aaron Rodgers did not play well. And I think the other thing is, why I would put more credit into a Robert Saleh hire is he knows how to function in a dysfunctional organization. And I think that that's a key thing. And I like the type of attitude he would bring. And I think that because he comes from that Kyle Shanahan tree as well, he's going to go get someone from that tree, I feel, to really facilitate the offense. That's why I would like, if you like looking at the pool of candidates that exist, I know that he's not my number one choice, and we'll get into who it is in a moment. But out of the candidates they've currently interviewed, I think Robert Saleh is the best one so far. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Robert Saleh is more than qualified. I would really like this hire. I get it, the record and everything, but I mean, the Jets are a dumpster fire. This is the thing, though. I do think that this is a Rooney Rule qualifier, but also I think that there is serious interest from the Cowboys when it comes to him potentially being a defensive coordinator. From everything I'm hearing about San Francisco, I think they're going in a different direction. I think they're going more with like Dennis Allen, somebody along those lines, compared to Robert Saleh. But we'll see. I mean, maybe Robert Saleh does end up there. I think a lot of the speculation from Saleh returning to San Francisco is kind of external, but I mean, we'll see with that. Yeah, I mean, again, not too much to say here, just because I don't believe in the legitimacy of this interview from the Cowboys to Robert Saleh to be the head coach. I think it's a very small possibility that that's going to be the case, and that's where I'll leave that.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Look, I hope him the best of luck. He definitely is deserving of being a coach in this league. I feel like he got a tough situation. And like, I think the fact that Aaron Rodgers threw him under the bus and still the Jets sucked is hilarious, just because of the fact, not for Saleh's sake, but the fact that Aaron Rodgers thinks he can own the place, could basically ruin the whole Jets organization. But again, we know how they are. But now I want to get into the wild card / big names that have been thrown out at the beginning of the cycle. And those two names were Deion Sanders and Jason Witten. Now, for those that do not know, Deion has been a coach in college, primarily for, I want to say, when he got Jackson State back in 2020. But he was also like a high school coach, earlier than that for I think 5 or 6-ish years. And then he eventually got the job with Colorado, where you're starting to see the program turn around from where it once was. And I think that for those that know Deion, cult of personality, he's very big on certain things. He's brought along several people to help him out. Mike Zimmer is a connection we know that was with him when he was at Colorado and even at Jackson State. And we have heard that Jerry Jones called him and saying, hey, are you interested in this job? Would this be something you want to do? And for those that want to know how the collegiate aspect of it works, is that if the Cowboys formally want to interview him and hire him, if they want to interview him, they have to talk to their athletic director to get permission, which they could be denied, but they need to get permission. And then finally, there is an $8 million buyout, which I think is chump change if you consider how much money they would make back by just having. But I just think that at the end of the day, I don't think Deion will be coming here, just after seeing how the traction immediately died out. They haven't had him for an interview. Then again, I do know that if Deion was offered the job, he would take it for sure. But again, that comes down to Jerry and them being willing to buy him out of the deal and go from there. And some people think it's like a leverage thing. But one thing that I want to be very clear on, there's one thing that I'm very scared of when you hire a guy like Deion, is how much of a buy-in is he going to have to this program? Give me the space. What the hell does that mean? When you think about what he's done at Jackson State, right? Which I don't have a problem with him getting a new coach, or a new coaching job. But when we talk about okay, he goes, let's just say a couple years and then he moves on, a couple years, then he moves on. Could that happen with Dallas? Does he, or does he get frustrated? Right? That's where I think we're at. And then for Jason Witten, he's been coaching high school football since he's retired, but again, the fact that he's possibly going to be at that is insane to me. I like Witten as, a player until the very end, but if he gets hired as the head coach, I'm just throwing myself out the window, so to speak. But go on. I want to hear what you have to say about this.
So, real quick, Pro Football Talk just posted this quote: "The on-again, off-again DraftKings betting odds for the Cowboys head coaching job are back on, and Brian Schottenheimer is the new favorite at -250."
We'll talk about him later on in the show. We're definitely going to highlight him because that's that was something that caught my eye a couple days ago. He was getting some traction from people I've talked to behind the scenes. So we'll talk about him. But what are your thoughts on possibly getting Deion in here, possibly having Witten in here? What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, no. See, here's the thing. It goes hand in hand with me. Jerry Jones loves Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders loves Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones loves Jason Witten. Jason Witten loves Jerry Jones. And it doesn't seem like there's any internal I guess you would say, discussion around, Jason Witten being the next head coach. I think they want him on the coaching staff. I do think they want that. No, I don't think Jason Witten's going to get the shot. I would actually put it at like a minus 10% chance that he gets the job. That's how confident I am that he's not getting the job. Same thing with Deion Sanders. He's not getting this job. I just don't think that there are enough smart people within this, or I think that the smart people that are within this organization, because I do think that there are smart people in the organization because they are able to have the type of success that they've had in the regular season. That doesn't come by accident. I think those people would say, no to both of those guys. They're not ready to be NFL head coaches. The idea of Coach Prime is fun because it's Deion Sanders. Everybody loves Deion Sanders, right? Colorado turned from a 1-win team to an 9-win team in year 2 of him being at that program. So impressive stuff to say the least from Deion Sanders, but I don't see it there. And Jason Witten, I just don't want to spend too much time talking about them because I really don't think it's going to happen.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I'm just like, we're just going to keep it at that. Now, I did want to shift gears now that we've gotten to where we're at, to 2 guys that were thrown out in the media cycle. And one of them, the Cowboys really allegedly liked, which was Aaron Glenn. And then Ben Johnson was a name we've talked about before. Now, Aaron Glenn, former Cowboy, of course, he was here in 05 and 06, I believe. And then just going through his history, he started out in Cleveland back in 2014 as, I believe, let me look here, assistant defensive backs coach. Then he went to New Orleans for a couple of years, and then he got promoted because he was with Dan Campbell over in New Orleans. And then he got promoted to be the DC, and he's been that for quite some time. And I think one of the things that I like about Aaron Glenn, I understand people will talk about what happened in the playoff game. Aaron Glenn, to me, is the closest you're going to get to a Bill Parcells hire, so to speak, with coming from that coaching tree, no nonsense. You're getting a guy that's coming from, a culture that clearly is, we're going to still win games. Granted, they just lost. I'm not dismissing that, but they keep moving along. And I think that that's why I'm very big. Like, it used to be Ben Johnson for me, but I think that Aaron Glenn just makes so much sense because to me, if you're going to go after a DC to be your head coach, you need to have a good OC. And I think that he would bring someone in. Do I think they'll hire Aaron Glenn? No, but I would absolutely love if we got, one of those 2 in here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Those are names that I'm definitely interested in as well. When it comes to Aaron Glenn, that's your kind of culture guy. I look at him and saying, hey, this guy could be the next like Mike Tomlin. That's the type of respect I have for Aaron Glenn. Younger candidate too. I think he's 52 years old. So, you could have this guy around for the next 10, 15 years easily if you want to. So that's something to take into account. And I know somebody in the comment section said Aaron Glenn looked bad because his defense was Swiss cheese, not because of scheme, but injuries. And I 100% agree with that. I mean, let's be honest here. The Detroit Lions defense overperformed when you talk about all the injuries that they dealt with. I understand it was really bad in the playoffs, but Aaron Glenn did a really good job of utilizing players that, were pretty much brought in the week before, and him going in there and saying, hey, this is the game plan we have. This is how we're going to deploy you, and we're going to work like that. So Aaron Glenn, to me, leader of men, knows how to interact with the players on his football team. And I believe in his ability to really have a tree of coaches. He to me, could be one of these coaches that he has a whole entire tree of guys on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And one thing that he said that I really liked was, hey, I coach. I just happen to coach on defense, but you're getting a coach for the entire football team if you hire me. Just, the way he talked when he was on the pivot with Ryan Clark. This guy seems like he is a legitimate leader of men. And there is a relationship there with Jerry Jones and Aaron Glenn. So a name that I'm definitely looking for and I think is a guy who could definitely play into this. I think more so than Ben Johnson, even though I would definitely be okay if Ben Johnson gets this Cowboys head coaching job. I would actually really love that. But I think that it's the same idea as with Kellen Moore, but just Ben Johnson's a better play caller. And this is what I mean. Ben Johnson to me doesn't strike me as, a rah leader type of guy. That's just not what he does. I think that they would need to get a strong-minded defensive coordinator in here. And I think that this is a player-led leadership structure if you hire Ben Johnson, right? Which is fine. That's completely fine with me because I believe in the quarterback that the Cowboys have, and I believe in his ability to be able to get guys to play for him and rally the troops. So, that's the way I look at this.
Gotcha. No, for sure. Absolutely. And this is an interesting name that I'm going to throw out there because a couple minutes ago, there was a rumor that circulated that the Cowboys are set to possibly ask for permission to interview him. And that's Kliff Kingsbury of the Washington Commanders.
So for those, out, by the way,
yes, that there was a rumor that came out, I want to say about 30 minutes ago. And also Ian Rappaport said that they could add Kliff Kingsbury to their list. And because now, again, because the one thing as there's a little side note. I have said that if the Eagles continue to win, the likelihood of Kellen Moore coming here is not as high and here's why, because the fact is that if they are not going to, if they, after the Leslie Frazier interview, if they go after someone else or interview someone else, I don't think that Kellen Moore is the guy, because if we're really thinking about it, right, if they already went to Kellen, who was the first guy, they're familiar with him, and they are like, I want to talk with Kliff, or I want to talk with Aaron and all these other guys. I don't think Kellen's going to be the guy. So that's something I wanted to point out to the viewers out there. Just my opinion. I could be wrong. But let's talk about Kliff Kingsbury, okay? I know that we've talked about him behind the scenes. For those that don't know his history, been in coaching for quite some time, known to be, the college guy at Texas Tech before he became the Arizona Cardinals head coach. Now, one of the things I'm not a fan of with Kliff Kingsbury, and the theme of his teams, is that they start off really hot and then they cool off towards the tail end of years, which again, I'm not a fan of. But he's been doing fantastic stuff over there in Washington. It's very hard to not mention that. And I think that, you're talking about a dude that reinvigorated a Cardinals team, and now he's in Washington doing these things. But let's talk about that. What would you feel like a guy that's a Texas native coaching the Dallas Cowboys? What do you feel about Kliff Kingsbury?
I know there's a lot of criticism around his head coaching stint there with Arizona and also with Texas Tech. I would also just say, hey, he was young. I mean, how old is Kliff Kingsbury? Let me look that up. He's
45. He is 45 years old.
He's 45. Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I'd be willing to give it a chance just because, people grow, people mature, and I'd love to see him with another shot. I mean, Bill Belichick coached the Browns. That was his first head coaching job, and then he ended up coaching the Patriots. And look at what happened. Am I saying that it would be to a Bill Belichick level? Absolutely not. But can he be like a Kyle Shanahan type guy? I think he could be that. Could. Jaden Daniels is playing really good football right now. And I do think a lot of that has to do with Kliff Kingsbury and the way he's deploying his offense. I think him and Dak would really get along with each other. I think that you would need, if you're telling me that the coaches are Kliff Kingsbury and like a Robert Saleh or somebody like that, sign me up. I'm absolutely on board for that. So, Kliff Kingsbury, definitely a name to look out for. And, I'm for it.
Yeah, for sure. No, look, I have no problem bringing him aboard. The one thing is about when we talk about these candidates, you got to talk about the negatives and the positives, of course. And I think that for Kliff, to your point, I agree. Look, Kliff has now started to develop to the NFL game. I know he took a brief stint with USC for a bit before he came back with Washington. But I think the one thing about what he does is that he has energized that offense in a way that I think we would want to see. Now, to the point of, because I did see it in the comment section, well, he prefers doing it with mobile quarterbacks. I don't think that's really a big deal, because when we're really talking about it, like, he's a guy that understands offense, and I think that if you really want to do the mobile, hey, bring Trey Lance back and we'll run some packages with him. But all jokes aside, I do think that the what sticks out to me the most about bringing a guy like Kliff in here for an interview tells me that maybe they are not set on the guys that they did interview. And I think that that's the key thing for me. And that's like, because for those that do not want Kellen Moore, as this process drags on, again, the longer that we go without, with another name being out there, and yes, the GM was so bad for the Cardinals there. It's not even funny.
And hey, they did have success under him, by the way.
And and I will say that's why I said, like, I'm not taking away what Kliff did, because he did re-energize that Cardinals team that was just dead to right when he first got there. But at the end of the day, I think that if he does get permission to get interviewed, I think we're going to be singing a different song and tune, and I think they're very serious about going in a different direction, which I hope so, because it would be the first time they've done that they went in a different direction, like, again, since Jimmy Johnson was here. Now, did you have anything else to add on, Kliff, before we get into the other name that came up that's coming up today?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Like, when it comes to the general manager, I don't think they've done. I mean, you saw that team last year there with Jonathan Gannon. Look, they're just a poorly constructed football team. They have holes in certain places, and hey, look, when Kliff Kingsbury came along and they won 11 games, I mean, I thought that was a bit of an overachieving team there. And I mean, look, Kyler Murray, I mean, we have to start having some serious discussions about how good or, average he might be, because I mean, struggled down the stretch here, and he had his best season there with Kliff Kingsbury. So was it Kliff Kingsbury that brought down Kyler, or was it Kyler that brought down Kliff Kingsbury? I don't think we have an answer to that yet.
Right. No, for sure. Absolutely. And I think that that's really the big thing on that. And so now we got to talk about the betting odds favorite now. And this is something that Bobby Bell, many other media members have been talking about. And this is a name that circulated even at the beginning of the cycle. Brian Schottenheimer. Yes, that Brian Schottenheimer, the guy that was with the team in 2022, came aboard as the OC officially in 2023. He's been in the league for, since I've been alive, since 1997. But the thing is that I just laugh at the idea of hiring Brian Schottenheimer, because, again, it's like a similar hire to Kellen Moore. You are literally, now granted, different dude. To me, it's just like, it's lazy. And the thing that scares me, though, is if they do hire Brian Schottenheimer, that seems really much so like a bridge head coach. Like, they're like, okay, you're going to look, we can't, like, how do I word it? Oh, we wanted to keep Mike McCarthy, but he told us to go F ourselves. Let's just keep his own guy as the head coach, because it's basically like McCarthy. Isn't that right, guys? And then they can have him for a couple seasons, and then they can bring in another dude. They want like Jason Witten or some crap like that as he gets more experience. Like, that's what scares me, man, is like they will sell us on Brian Schottenheimer because they're like, well, he was a part of a staff that went 12-5 3 straight years. Him and McCarthy are cool. Like, dude, the only reason him and McCarthy are cool is because him and his father were, close like that. So it's his son, of course it's like that. And I'm not trying to diminish what Brian Schottenheimer has done in this league, but that's why the connection's there. But again, I think if you do hire Brian Schottenheimer, you're just going to get, I don't want to say it's like Mike McCarthy 2.0, because I don't think he's like, I don't know if I could say he's as good of a CEO as a Mike McCarthy, but to me, it would signal that they want to keep the McCarthy project going without him being here, if that makes any sense. Do you see where I'm getting at with that?
Yeah. See, I don't know if I 100% agree. I really don't, because, Brian Schottenheimer came out in interviews and talked about things that he wanted to do to get receivers open. I mean, this guy, when you listen to him in interviews, he commands a room. Brian Schottenheimer can command a room. There's a lot of people with a ton of respect for Brian Schottenheimer
in that building.
In the building and on the football team. I mean, he was I think he was like the advanced analyst. Like, he'd be the guy that would watch tape of teams that they're playing a few weeks down the line so that when they get to game day or when they get to game week, they're like, here's what I gathered on this football team. And apparently the guys on defense gained a ton of respect for him. I mean, you see him on the sideline. CeeDee Lamb catches a ball on an out route. You see Brian Schottenheimer, let's go. I mean, I think there's legit energy with Brian Schottenheimer. I'd be interested to see what type of offense he'd run. And I'm going to be honest with you. I wouldn't poo-poo it. I'd be like, all right, I'll give it a chance. I mean, am I going to be beating my chest saying this is the guy that's going to bring us to, that next level? I mean, I'm not going to say that, but I'm willing to give him a chance. No doubt about it.
I will say this. If they hire Brian Schottenheimer, like, that has to be like one hell of a lazy. This is just me. It would be a lazy ass coaching search because to me, like, again, there are plenty of other candidates that are out there that I think are better. Now, if you put a gun to my head and said space, would you rather have Kellen Moore or Brian Schottenheimer? I'd probably say Schotty. I'd give him a chance just because with Kellen, we know what we had. And I think that the thing is Brian Schottenheimer's never been a head coach at this level. I want to be very clear on that. And it's not like this guy hasn't been in football for only 5 goddamn years acting like he owns the place. I'm not saying Kellen's like that. Guy's been in football since 97. Not saying he doesn't know his stuff, but clearly, like, to your point, like, that's something that I understand. Like, Brian Schottenheimer, if you go back and watch what the Seahawks did in that let Russ cook era, that is the type of offense that you could be looking at with him because they did have top 10 offenses there while he was in Seattle. And again, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I one thing that I want to add to this is that, like, Dallas did have the number 1 offense in the league back there in 2023. I mean, I think in a lot of these cases, you see teams that have an offense that is ranked that highly, and that offensive coordinator is getting head coaching interviews. I think, there's a stigma around Brian Schottenheimer, and that's why I'm interested to see what's going on there with Schottenheimer because I don't think you're just getting a carbon copy of Mike McCarthy. I want to see what his offense would be because I know there was friction there between Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer.
Yes, that was why he left. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But Russell Wilson was having good seasons under Brian Schottenheimer. So, I'd welcome it. I really would. I wouldn't be jumping for joy, but I'd give it a shot. I'm not going to poo-poo it if it happens.
No, right. Yeah. Like, look, if he gets this job, congrats to him. I'm not going to be upset with that sort of in the slightest, just because this is the reason why I would be a little bit upset. It's just because of the fact that, like, it feels as if you wanted to keep McCarthy, but, like, you had the whole falling out. If that makes that's where I'm getting at. But, like, look, I will say this. If you told me Kellen or Schottenheimer, I'm probably going with Schottenheimer, and I do see Showtime, shout out to you. I know Brian knows his stuff. I know he is not stupid. I'm not trying to say, like, insinuate that you thought I was saying that, but that's one of the things I will say is that Brian, he learned a lot from his dad. And I think that if he is given this opportunity, I mean, to me, I think for the fan base, I'm just talking about it from this perspective. A lot of the fans are on a teetering towards apathy type of situation with this team. And I think that if you hire him, a lot of people will be like, well, I don't like the name because it feels like it's not something new. And I don't blame anybody for thinking that way. I've said that the fan base needs a shot of adrenaline because we haven't made it to the conference title in 30 years, let alone a Super Bowl in 30 years. And the fact is, and this is the only other complaint that I would have with bringing Schottenheimer aboard. He worked with Mike Solari, who I'm not a fan of. I hate how he works. That's the only concern that I have with a guy like Brian Schottenheimer. Does he keep the same coaches here and in essence doesn't change that's my only concern. If you keep Brian Schottenheimer, you continue what you've been doing just with a different name, maybe a different look on offense, but still that's really it for me. But did you have anything else on Brian before we move on to just the two other names that were brought up in the cycle?
Nah. Yeah, we're good here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the two other names that were brought up in the cycle, not for like, let's just say head coaching positions, right? We're talking about like positional type of things, like running backs coach. So the two other names, this isn't going to be like super in depth, just for people to keep in mind for the show as we're doing this, is that DeMarco Murray and Tashard Choice were brought up as names to be added onto the coaching staff. Now keep in mind, like, DeMarco's been at Oklahoma for quite some time as the running back coach. Same thing with Tashard. He's been with Texas with the Longhorns fairly recently. But again, when you've been in coaching and you're moving around and stuff like that, I think that there's merit to that. I wouldn't be upset with them because, again, it's not like a Kellen Moore situation where like you just retired and you become a coach at the NFL level. And so, I mean, like, was there any other names that you thought, hey, like if they're going to bring in new guys as on this coaching staff? I know Jason Witten was a name. Like, what do you think, man? Like, was there anything else? Like, what do you feel about that stuff like that?
I'm very interested in Tashard Choice. I'll be honest with you, because I mean the University of Texas has been churning out running backs here, right? Like, and they dealt with some injuries there at the running back position, and they were still able to run the ball effectively in some of these games. So I'd be very interested there. DeMarco Murray was obviously a really good running back for the Cowboys, and I'd be interested in that as well. I want strong personalities on this coaching staff. I really do. Witten, I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with Jason Witten. And you want to know what? If I'm Dallas, Lunda Wells, I'd just make him the offensive line coach. I mean, there's a lot of people who think that Lunda Wells could be a really good offensive line coach, and he was offered to be that for the Commanders last year. So, hey, look, if you're telling me that we're bringing in DeMarco as our running back coach, Witten as our tight end coach, and Lunda Wells is our offensive line coach, sign me up.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely agree. And I think that, that's one of the big things that I want to see is, like, if you're going to hire a former player, do it when they get some experience and then they can come along to the NFL level. Now, I did want to open up the floor to questions to anybody in the chat. If you do have any questions, concerns, comments, you name it, regarding with how the coaching search is going or just anything, by all means, if you put that in the comments, we'll go ahead and go through that. We'll give it 5 minutes to be filled up there. But I was going throughout Twitter/X, whatever we call it, as I say. That was pretty much the two major updates. Was that the possibility of Kliff Kingsbury rumored to be asked to be interviewed or get permission from the Commanders to be interviewed, and Brian Schottenheimer becoming the favorite. And I want to be very clear, like, betting odds, like, you might be saying that's stupid. Like, why would I care about that? But betting odds tell a lot about, like, behind the scenes things. And I think that's what's scary, is that, like, how quickly they've been changing. Because before it was Deion, then it was Kellen, and now it's Brian. And so I wonder if, and I will say this, I do think if Brian Schottenheimer does land an interview and no one else gets the interview, I think he's the guy. Usually the Cowboys like to talk with a bunch of people when they've done it before. The last time they had like a serious head coaching search was 2007. They talked to like, I think 5 or 6 dudes. And then they went with Wade Phillips. And so I think that when we really think about this, it is very peculiar with how they've been going about this. And I think that as I'm seeing it here, people are not fans of like, oh, it'd be an uninspiring hire. But I'm going to just be honest with you with the whole idea of bringing Sean. I know, like, I have my gripes with it. just because of who he could bring in as personnel. To your point, would I be mad if Brian Schottenheimer was the head coach? No, I wouldn't, because at the end of the day, like, this is a first-time head coach. Oh, but Space Jason Garrett was a first time. That's not what I'm getting at. Think about it. But, like, he's been around several organizations, well-respected. And on top of that, if you feel like the culture here in Dallas, like, this is just talking to the fan that's like, we shouldn't have let go of Mike McCarthy, which I don't know if anybody's out there. But if you feel like we were in a situation where Mike McCarthy was in a situation where he should have come back or whatever the case may be, and they're like, oh, we really want Mike back. Brian Schottenheimer is going to be the closest thing to that, like, of continuing the McCarthy program, all but in name. And I think it's just because we're looking for just, I don't want anybody from the previous coaching staffs, which, by the way, if Mike McCarthy does get if Brian Schottenheimer does get hired, it still continues the trend of the Cowboys not doing a new head coach, in terms of them already being on the staff since Jimmy Johnson. So, and I think that Mike McCarthy's set to land either the Saints or the
Bears.
The Bears job, which I was going to put this out on Twitter, but I didn't, just for the sake of not letting it actually come to fruition. The joke was, could you imagine if he goes to Chicago and he takes them to an NFC title game before we do?
I saw that. Yeah. I mean, look, it is what it is. Yeah, it's not fun, but yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be interesting here. Yeah, I just can't get a gauge on this thing. I really can't, but I mean, look, we'll see. We will see. For
sure. Absolutely. And I think that one of the big things is, again, we'll have conversations. I listen to Brian Broaddus and all those other guys, and look, you can't sell me on Kellen Moore, but can you sell me on Brian Schottenheimer? Perhaps. Maybe,
yeah,
but no, but
you could tell me on him.
But there is traction to his name, and
I'd have to see it.
Right, exactly, because, like, that's the one thing. And then just kind of looking at the comments, if he gets the job in house, I hope we keep Al and make him DC. Everyone can go. Maybe Greg Ellis can stay. Yeah, for sure. And again, I think that, well, to me, it comes down to if you bring a guy that was on your staff previously who's coming back. Because if it's the same dudes, we're just going to complain, like, okay, you brought back the same guys that we still have problems at these positions. But again, we'll see how things go from there. But I'm just saying, was there any other things you had, my guy?
Quick question. So, Brian Schottenheimer, has he ever had a head coaching job?
No, never. I don't.
Hey, you want to know what? Somebody getting an opportunity that might.
Let me look.
That might be something.
I think I said he didn't have a head coaching.
If we have nothing else to go over, we can definitely end this. I've had a long morning.
Same. I completely agree. And I think that it's just been, and also just because we're so, like, we're on pause, right? Like, we want to do the mock drafts. We want to talk about who they should bring back, but because they don't have a head coach in place, it gets annoying because now we're just like, we're waiting. So look, guys, we want to thank you guys so much for tuning in for episode 3 of the podcast. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new. Follow us on all the social media platforms, you name it. And on top of that, don't, just keep an eye out for those clips that come out, like those when they come out. And, in case you are catching this at the tail end of the show. And now, man, we went through now I would say 2 whole weeks before we got a new head coach. We'll see if we go for a third. But no, man, it was good talking to you, Chris. Was there anything else you needed before we close out?
Hey, everybody in the chat, we have 354 people. Make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. I'm over there, Cowboys Beat on YouTube, TikTok, now that the ban has been lifted for the current moment. I'm on X and Instagram, so make sure to go follow me there. Podcasts are going to start up very soon because I just got a new office. So, a lot of things going on. And if you guys haven't already, please make sure to follow Ricardo Space Cowboy Media on all social medias.
Awesome. Well, with that, we will see you guys in the next one next week, maybe with a new head coach.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right, guys. Peace out.